I am Erik Robertson, the founder of Nordic Game Conference and other things. I thought I'd share some things that I feel you need to know about the Nordic games industry. So I've changed the title on Oleg here. It's not so much a Nordic game industry overview as sort of the roots of the Nordic game industry. What you need to know, first of all, that it's old. It's sort of like me. This is actually the platform I played my first real computer game on. It's a PDP-10 hooked up to a teletype terminal, or the other way around. I didn't play it in 1969. I didn't play it until 1976. Arcade Defender was the first game that I got any sort of good at myself. Despite my age, I've always been something of a gamer. It's been as important as music, games, books, film, and so forth for me, which is maybe a bit of a rarity in my generation. Yes, I turned 60 this spring. I've never had a proper job, my mother still says, so I'm always worked somewhere where IT and marketing meet. Trying to also not only play games but actually also make them wasn't that much of a stretch for me. And I actually got made and got paid for an advert game back in '97. But the games industry turned out to be one of the hardest industries I've encountered so far. So I very early looked at possibilities for small game developers to help out, maybe share resources, maybe help each other on sales, etc. That didn't resonate very well, honestly. But what we did was set up a local IGGA chapter. I was eventually hired to do some surveys based on my academic experience. I was hired to make a survey of the availability of Nordic games for the Nordic Ministers of Culture. Started the Nordic Game Conference in 2004 and has been running it ever since. But I've also been part of creating the Swedish trade organization and also the Federation of European Trade Organizations for the games industry. And last year, a childhood dream of mine came true, and I was able to start venture capital investing in the games industry. In other words, replacing the government support scheme that we had before. Before you should now see some 10 pretty famous examples of Nordic games, if they should be unfamiliar to you for some reason. And everybody has heard of Unity, and all of you have some experience using it also for development. I'm certain all of you listeners. But so that's just setting the background. But it's a pretty successful industries that we have in the Nordic games industry. But we've had reason to talk and think a little bit about what this actually stems from. And some people like to claim that we have storytelling traditions going back to the Viking sagas from over 1,000 years ago. And yeah, well, that might be true. I think many people, of course, have their storytelling traditions. I think we might be a little bit overwhelmed by our own. But we certainly had an early general IT maturity in the population. We have these long, dark winters that sort of force you to sit indoors and do something. Maybe in your basement on a computer. And it's also the case, I mean, we are all 5 small countries, from very small to small. And so exports, that's sort of in our blood. If you're going to make something, you need to very quickly sell it to the world to make a viable business, especially if it's some sort of specialized product. And with the outcome of the Second World War, especially the Swedish perspective of trading to the south changed, and suddenly we were trading to the west, and English became much more important. But being small language territories, Uh, um, Sweden being the largest language territory, I mean, we were almost about 10 million people. It does not make sense to dub or voice over films. You text, and that means that we learn the pronunciation and language. It's a real advantage. And we do have some traditions, I would say, when it comes in other industries, when it comes to design values, usability, quality of products, and the reliability of us as suppliers in business to business relations. I think that the Nordic games industry also displays those same qualities for a number of reasons, whether they're cultural or necessary for coming from small language territories, I don't know. But we like to think that that's the case. And let's go to the next slide. But it all stems from piracy, basically. Like the Vikings were raiding and pillaging all over the world, we started out stealing. And pirate copying led to some people that were impatient to try that out themselves, to get their hands on software and games as soon as possible. And this turned into some sort of a competitive sport where different teams competed on how to break the protection on new games and products and upload to dial-up databases where you could download. And then you started competing on making the most impressive loading screens or your tags at the beginning of the game that you crack. And then that turned into a sport in itself, just impressing your friends by the graphics and the general experience that you could squeeze out of limited memory and processor hardware. And that is actually now a recognized cultural heritage in Finland, the demo scene, impressing your friends with what you can squeeze out of a Commodore 64 or something. But I mean, government also plays a role here with what's been done on mobile telephony and subsidies in Sweden for home PCs. The idea was that all parents should with subsidized personal computers learn Excel in their spare time. I don't know if that was very successful, but it certainly put hardware in the hands of a lot of aspiring young players and coders, maybe 12 plus, rather than their parents. I mean, in the Nordic countries, we have also subsidies in different ways, and both from innovation and cultural policy perspective. And we also have the Nordic Game program that I designed and led for a number of years, which gave us 120 plus games that actually more than half of them have been published to date. It was a time-limited program. It was extended, but it finally ran out in 2015. But I mean, is there something in our culture, our industrial culture, that explains our successes in the game space? Well, meritocracy is a big thing. It's not about your last name or who your parents are. You need to be, your work needs to be, and you as a person need to be reliable. It's about risk management, possibly under bad weather conditions or even at sea. So, and game development, in my view, lends it very well to flat organizations, because success needs that to succeed with a new entertainment product that actually brings something new, that it's not more of the same. It actually needs inspiration. And to get that inspiration, to maximize the opportunities for inspiration, you need a diverse culture where everyone has a voice and the right to at least try to contribute. And those are very, very strong Nordic cultural and political values: equal rights and freedom of expression. And I think that also is very important for game development. And that is also why we're at the top of the chart. We have the highest rate of employment of game development. in Iceland, the games industry is just behind the banks and insurance companies when it comes to employing IT personnel. The Canadians are good competitors on the list, but just as with the animation industry, they stole half the French industry to kickstart what they have by tax subsidies. Hello, all Canadians. I think you have access codes and links to be able to sign up for the Nordic Game Conference next week. Free access one way or another. You are super welcome. And please also note that we are doing our first hybrid event, a true digital and a true physical games conference in combination in life here in Malmö, Sweden, and on the internets from May 18 to 20.